not everything that gets tried out is works well, right? So being able to evaluate it all the time and make those decisions in real time is very, very important, right? The intent is always good. The intent and knowledge based starting point is usually very good. Yeah, people. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, there's some excellent professionals in this country, right? Who are all trying to do very, very good things, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of scope for partnering and collaboration amongst each other to really make a real impact for the mental health need in this country.
Hi everyone, it's Varun Vamidi again. It's week 4 of Stars and Startups with me. And this week we speak about something that's been avoided quite a bit and that has become a topic of discussion during the pandemic. Given job losses, economic slowdown, and many reasons for anxiety, mental health. Amit Malik is the founder of Inner Hour, speaks about how Indians are taking to mental health, the stigma around it, and how technology is playing a huge role in bridging the gap. Inner Hour was selected to be part of the Facebook India Innovation Accelerator, a program named AI for Social Good that Amit talks about briefly. We also discuss how Inner Hour garnered 650,000 users on the Play Store and who uses Inner Hour today, and also discusses the Indian wellness landscape. Stick around till the end. There's a giveaway from Amit until the lockdown ends. Enough from me, on to the show.
Hey Amit, long time no see. It's a very interesting time that we live in. But before we get into all of that, you've been running Inner Hour for over 5-6 years now, and you've spent a lot of time doing other things. I'd love to. I think our audience would love to hear what brought you to Inner Hour and what have you been up to? Like, what brought you on this journey?
So hi Varun. So thanks for having me on the show, right? No, things have been busy outside, but yeah, let me just tell you a bit about myself and how we got here in the first place, right?
Yep.
So I'm a psychiatrist by background. I trained in India and then went up to the UK to do my psychiatric training. Worked in mental health all my life. That's the only thing I know after medical school. And so after I finished training for 6 years, in the UK, I then became a consultant in the NHS, the National Health Service, in the UK. And there I started, in addition to providing clinical care to patients, I started managing the services I was working in. So starting with, let's say, a 16 people team when I first started, to then managing larger and larger teams. So then, as I went along, and at some point in that journey, I went out to business school. So I went to a London Business School, did my MBA, came out and joined the board of a mental health organization just outside London, doing not only sort of clinical operations for one part of their organization, but also looking at innovation as well as commercial growth for the organization, right? And in that journey, what I really saw in the final few years before I moved back to India was the impact of tech and the impact tech was having on giving people early access, giving people the right kind of support in terms of ongoing access, making the access frictionless, allowing engagement of people with mental illness, not just at the beginning, but throughout their journey, which really had a positive impact on outcomes, right? So here it was a marriage of what was happening in the digital space with what was being done offline to actually give people better access, better outcomes in the service. So, in addition to my day job, I'd also worked over the years with large professional bodies like the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the European Psychiatric Association, and the European Board of Psychiatry, right? And really gave me the opportunity to understand the mental health challenges at scale, right? So, what are the challenges around professional development and getting the workforce ready? What are the challenges around being able to provide services to as many people as possible at the right price points and the right cost, so that more people can get access to services? What are the challenges in actually reducing stigma? All of those things were things that I got to see at a population level. So I had an opportunity to move to a different role within my organization. Uh, and I said before taking that another commitment of 5 years, I'd been really keen to build something in the mental health space in India. And I was really, really convinced by now that tech had to play a huge part of what we're going to build. Right? I haven't seen all those challenges at a population level. Also, having seen that the role of tech really enhances the value of each dollar spent in providing people services. So from that perspective, I was kind of convinced that at least we should really build something that is tech-enabled for mental health, and especially in India where the workforce challenges are so huge in mental health, then really come back and build it here so that it can have the biggest impact. So yeah, so I moved back here about 6 years ago, worked with a bunch of sort of large organizations in an advisory capacity, whether it was Narayana, whether it was MediAssist and a few other healthcare organizations, and then set up NRR about 4 years ago now. So it's been 4 years that I've been.
Tell me something. How many psychiatrists have MBAs? Is that normal?
So I don't know the number, but increasingly doctors. So my business school class had me as the only doctor in the class, and I think, but increasingly, every batch, and at least at LBS, who had one or two doctors in the class. So more and more globally, at top tier business schools, you're seeing doctors coming in taking on MBAs. How many of them are psychiatrists? I don't know, but we're also seeing a big trend of medical managers and doctors who are managers at senior positions at board level for CEOs. And the data is early data is kind of showing that medical managers are better, and the organizations that are run by medically trained senior managers have better outcomes than organizations that aren't. So there's a lot of incentive from an organizational perspective and individual perspective for doctors, senior doctors, to go and train themselves in management, so that both for our patients and for our services, we can provide better outcomes.
So you're saying it is a positive aspect for this to happen, right? Because there is a critique that doctors, hospitals are increasingly being run as a business, and that's the downside globally. Do you think that's a good thing? So because it's being run more professionally, or do you think there are some downsides for hospitals being run as businesses?
So there are pros and cons. So I think what's most important is that hospitals and all healthcare organizations are run professionally, right? What's also very, very important is that at the point of care delivery, so at the point where a patient receives care from a healthcare professional, money is not a consideration, right? So at that point of care delivery, you deliver the best care to the person in front of you. I think those things are very, very important, right? But in that context, the fact that healthcare as a business has been around for decades now, right? We don't like to call it that, but it's been a reality in developed markets, in developing markets. We are seeing trends and a strong trend that in the developed world, where there's a population level solution provided, whether it's the sort of the healthcare systems in Scandinavia or in the UK, where the systems are population level and joined up, right? And then run professionally, right? So there still need to be professional management of those. There, the outcomes are better, right? Compared to a system like the US, which is a lot more fragmented and privatized, and there the challenges are around outcomes and money spent and the outcome per dollar spent, essentially. So whether it's private or public, the big challenge that needs to be solved for is that all healthcare organizations need to be delivered professionally, right? And by professional managers who understand healthcare, right?
Sure.
And secondly, that there are system solutions, that they don't try and solve the parts of healthcare in isolation, right? So as long as those two are solved for, then a big hurdle is met already. Then yes, healthcare is a business in one way or the other. It's a huge part of the GDP spent per capita GDP spent of many large economies. Now, whether it's a private business or a public health business, it depends on different systems, and there are pros and cons, and we can get into that. But yeah, when I see it's being run as a business, what I see is it being professionally run, right? Not necessarily that people are profiteering from it. So what's more important is the business are professionally run, right?
No, I think it's also important that people see both perspectives. Like, how do you ensure there's best delivery? And I see where you're coming from, saying that as a doctor and somebody who has that training, you also understand the nuances of that. As a business, from that standpoint, you've been back for like you mentioned, about 6 years now, and you've worked in the UK. A lot of these large corporates, etc. What are the biggest difference you've seen between the two that you thought was a stark kind of contrast in how they approach uh, health, wellness, mental health?
I think the one starting point to say is that both systems have very, very good doctors. Right? That is not a problem. So the quality of doctors in both systems, in fact, a lot of the doctors in the UK system are trained in this country. Right? So the doctors in both systems are excellent. Right? That's the starting point. So that's a big similarity, that you get to work with really good professionals, and not just doctors, but also nurses, other healthcare professionals that are very high quality. Right? So that's, and then very committed people on both sides. Now, the obvious big difference is that the UK health system is publicly funded, and the care is free at point of delivery. Whereas the Indian health system does have elements of that, but it's also a combination of a large private healthcare provision and public healthcare provision, right? Uh, the the reality of the Indian healthcare ecosystem, which requires a lot more supply, right? Because given the population size and complexities and the level of morbidities, you need a lot more supply in the Indian healthcare system as currently provided. And that's why you need multiple players, whether it's the government, whether it's individual practitioners, whether it's hospital chains, whether it's single specialty chains, whether it's digital platforms. You need multiple providers to work together to meet that need, right? So, I mean, this is a space, this is a country where you're still not worrying too much about competition in healthcare as such, because there's still such a huge unmet need. The bigger challenge here is to make sure that that people access services in a timely manner, that that offerings that are made available at different price points to people based on their affordability, right? So and then there has to be a huge emphasis on wellness and prevention. And I'll tell you why. Because given the size of the problem, right? Given the size of any healthcare problem, whether it's cardiology or diabetes or mental health, given the size of the problem we're talking about, it'll always be very difficult to have the entire problem solved just from a treatment perspective. See, healthcare has never been healthcare for the last 50 years. Healthcare is illness care. That today, in worldwide, what people provide is illness care, right? It's not, health means absence of illness.
Right.
So what we provide is illness care. When people fall sick, we treat them. Now, treating people who once have already fallen sick is harder, it's more difficult, and the outcomes are poorer. So you're much better off actually making sure that people don't fall sick. So creating systems, whether it's with insurance partners, whether it's with government, whether it's with employers, that incentivize people to look after their health and to tell people how to look after their health, physical and mental health, will really create an ecosystem where we're actually delivering true healthcare, which is focusing on wellness and prevention. And then that is the only way you can meet the needs or the healthcare needs of this population. Otherwise, the country is so huge and vast and diverse, the number of people we have here, that there'll always be an unmet need. No matter how much private players and governments do, unless we focus on the prevention part, there'll always be an unmet need that won't be met.
It's an interesting point you brought up. I used to run a company, rather, along with, I used to be part of a company called Life Dojo. It's run by the founder, Chris, and I was part of the founding team. And one of the things that we saw at that time was insurers were coming forward to do preventive health, kind of programs. And we focused on offering those programs in a way that, was consumable in bite-sized content, creating behavior change, so on and so forth, which actually they were more open to, because, in terms of the cost that an insurer would bear and how that trickles down to a corporate and how that leads to a lot of ripple effects. I think they have now reached a point where they're open to investing in preventive health. Is India moving in the same direction?
I mean, there are very forward-thinking insurance providers. We work with a couple that are thinking about how to help their client base early on, right? Whether it's the institutional client base or group, as it's called group insurance, the group client base, or individual client base, and how they can help individuals early on. And mental health is interesting, right? Because mental health is a huge correlation. So good mental health has a huge correlation to good physical health outcomes. So it's known that actually people who actually are in good mental health seek physical health interventions early. They are more likely to become planned with medication. They're more likely to have overall better treatment outcomes, right? So actually, the couple of partners we're working with are forward thinking enough to start thinking about saying, okay, if we provide our partners, our clients with better mental health, then that might lead to overall health outcomes to be better, essentially, right? So that's one thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that for some forward-thinking players, they're already thinking about how moving towards prevention is going to, in the long term, reap rewards on better payout ratios for insurance companies, overall sort of the, and obviously a lot of this is driven by a desire to do good, but also some of it is driven by the desire to have a better bottom line, right? For the insurance companies, the idea that how can we actually reduce payout ratios and have a better outcome from a finance perspective as well, in addition to having a better outcome from a group health perspective, is really driving some of these conversations forward. Having said that, it's still evolving in terms of what the payment model should be, right? So how should you charge somebody for improving their health? Whereas the payment model for intervention is very, very clear, right? You go to a hospital, you have an intervention, they have a slab for which through which they'll pay for that, and then you make a claim, and then the claim is verified, and you get paid. On the wellness side, there's still a journey by which we figure out how to actually make sure that you can monetize that wellness improvement. One is very clearly through sort of payout ratios, but can there be more transactional ways in which payment models can be developed with partners to do that? So I think the conversations are happening globally, and they're starting to happen in India as well, and I think they will have to happen. As I said before, there is no way that you can just provide illness care in India, given and then help everybody that needs help. It'll have to go towards the preventive side.
I think most businesses are defined by payment. So it's interesting you bring up, people are still trying to figure out how that works, because only then I think. Do you think only when they figure out, or rather when people do test the payment models, will it result in large scale adoption?
I think it's already happening. So, I mean, as I said, we're working with a couple of partners already in the insurance space, in the health insurance space specifically. We're talking to one partner in the life insurance space right now. So it's already beginning to happen, right? Because forward-thinking leaders in these organizations, insurance organizations, have seen models like this work out elsewhere, have their own views on how this could really drive success for their clients and for themselves. So I think they're already beginning to take some of these steps whilst they figure out payment models, right? And I think some of the profitability is very clear, right? On the commercial side, some of this is very clear, and that's through the bet is that over 3 to 5 years your payout ratios will come down because you made this small investment early on. So that's the bet some people are willing to take in a 3 to 5 year horizon, right? So that's what one thing is. And yes, if what they're also then, so there's one clear monetization model there. What they're also trying to figure out is, on top of that, can you also have a situation where you can also build this to somebody, whether it's a client or whether it's a partner. Can you also then create another second monetization layer on top of that? So and I think that'll just be an icing on the cake, because everybody then gets a benefit. The client gets the health benefit and lower healthcare costs and better healthcare outcome generally downstream. The provider gets the lower payout ratios, and the partners also might see an additional revenue or monetization stream that they're not tapping into right now. So I think this is a win-win for everybody over a period of time. But yeah, so some systems already there, some are evolving. But no, I think it's already happening. I don't think people are going to wait for very specific models to become clear.
So let's get into Inner Hour. You mentioned how technology is what drove you to want to start this. How technology is improving outcomes for mental health. Uh, what is Inner Hour today? And I believe over the 4 years you probably evolved the model as well. So could you take us through that journey?
So yeah, so I mean, Inner Hour today, essentially at the core today, is really the start of the journey. It's an integrated technology platform to provide frictionless 24/7 mental health support to individuals and to organizations. And that's what it does today. Now, as a starting point of that journey, is a lot of individuals with mental challenges, as a first step, want to work on themselves, right? And we know this because when we first launched the platform, we had over 100,000 conversations with users who had mental health difficulties, and we overwhelmingly heard the view that, no, at the first step, I'd like to work on myself, right? Some people, a percentage of them, definitely wanted to go and see somebody directly because they were at that point in their cycle or the journey. But for some people, or for a significant number of people, they were saying, I want to work on myself. And then for what we spent almost a year and a half building was a self-care platform. This today live, which is over 600,000 downloads. about 8 to 10,000, 10 to 10 12,000 people use it every day. And what it does, it provides people fully automated cognitive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy based programs, right? Which really allow them to work on a specific psychological condition. The programs are personalized to your individual profile, right? And that personalization is an ongoing journey, right? So as your profile changes, as symptoms change, then the personalization keeps adapting to that over a period of time, so that you get a journey of daily plans that is more personal to you. Now that's what the Innera does to as a core, and then we people can do this on their own, or they can do this with the support of a therapist, right? So we have a therapist backend, a therapist platform, where therapists have, with the user's consent, have full visualization, right, of what the user is doing on their plan, on their program, on their plan, and based on that, right, they are able to then give them daily guidance and help them through that journey. And that's a sort of daily engagement model, and then the final step is people can go and book sessions with therapists and have sort of 30 and 60-minute sessions with therapists through video, voice, and chat. So these are three sort of broad models that and they all exist in the same platform. The self-care tool also has multiple other tools which allow for further engagement and support to the user, whether it's a chatbot for when people are feeling intense emotions, whether it's a content feed that's again personalized to you on a daily basis, whether it's a sort of symptom tracker that collects and gives you insights and reflections back so that you can manage your day and weeks better, to help support your mental health journey. So all these tools are built in to support the daily plan that the user uses, which is the core of the whole platform. And then the support with the therapist, either through a daily engagement or through a session-based plan. That already exists. We do this for individuals. We also do this for employees who work for the specific employer organization, and it's been a lot of sort of user validation of the product in the last 18 months or so. But we also see, because we've not spent a ton of money to get these users, our acquisition costs are pretty much next to nothing. People, it's really a word of mouth spread, and then people using the product. That's really got to this point of validation.
So the 500K is all organic, mostly organic downloads.
It's mostly organic. So it's about 650K, and it's unfortunately we've seen a huge uptick in the last couple of months, and I say unfortunately given the context of why it's happened, but yeah, so we've seen a huge uptick in the last couple of months, and I think we're nearing about 650,000 downloads, and bulk of it, a significant part of it is organic, isn't it? So absolutely.
I mean, we're making this recording during the lockdown, so I would imagine there's a lot of job losses. People are looking for support. What is driving, say, the uptake? Is it just generally because there's anxiety in what the future holds, or is it they already were vulnerable and this has exacerbated their need for support? What has been the general kind of reason?
So I think the biggest, and you hit the nail on the head there, Varun, the biggest thing that's happened is that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Whether it's about your health, whether it's about your family's health, whether it's about your job, whether it's about your finances, whether it's about the future, whether it's about the lockdown, whether it's about how you're going to get your next set of groceries in the house. There's a lot of uncertainty, right, for a lot of people. And that uncertainty is often a progenitor for stress and anxiety. Right, so that's that, and so what we are seeing a lot, what the therapists are seeing a lot on the platform today, are people showing up for health anxieties, people showing up with new OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder kind of symptoms, some people showing up with post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, having seen somebody pass away or seen somebody have a traumatic experience. A lot of people having relationship difficulties that have now got compounded because people have been locked in a closed, confined space where there's no outlet that people might have had in the past. And so a lot of underlying relation challenges have got exposed in the last couple of months. People trying to come and talk about how to better manage their work-life balance, especially in the context of managing their families and the children who are at home right now. So a range of issues have come up, right? So I look at these things in two buckets. One big bucket is people who had pre-existing challenges with mental health in the past, right? So pre-existing need for mental health support in the past. And there's so what's happened there is that all these things, ambiguity, uncertainty, sort of high expressed emotions in close confined spaces, lack of access to their treating professionals sometimes, all of these things have led to a scenario where there's been more chances of relapse, right? Where people are, or worsening of the mental health condition for an individual. Then so there's more need on in that bucket, right? The second bucket is people who didn't have or didn't know that they had any mental health difficulties before. There's a sort of new origination of need in the mental health side. Now on that side, and I said we are seeing all these new things. I said new cases around of anxiety, health anxiety, OCD, PTSD, relationship difficulties is what the team are seeing a lot of, right? And so that's where both those put together has led to, our app downloads have gone by 45-50% in the last couple of months. Our session bookings have gone by 65-70% in the last couple of months. So we've onboarded a whole bunch of corporate clients, almost 40 new corporate clients in the last 6 weeks. We launched a pro bono program. We were concerned about a couple of things, right? If you were concerned about specific groups, right? Work from home employees was one, frontline healthcare workers was another, right? And other frontline workers was the third, right? So we were concerned about these groups, one. And second thing we're concerned about is that whilst a lot of focus, quite rightly, is on trying to manage COVID-19 and the health issues around that, and in the immediate term, that makes sense and for a lot of people to do. What we want to be able to support is giving people the right support psychologically and giving the right psychological strategies today, so that it avoids or lessens the medium to long-term psychological implications, right? What we don't know today, what is the big unknown, and there are people talking about the hidden pandemic right now around mental health in this time of crisis. What we don't know today for sure is what the impact on all of us will be in the medium to short long term psychologically, right? And previous health crises, previous disasters have shown that mental health needs can sometimes go by 5 times in the population at times of disaster. And this is a health disaster, right? What's happening right now with the number of people falling ill, people dying is a health disaster. So the mental needs will rise. So that's kind of the context in which we are seeing a lot more people coming out and seeking help, whether it's individuals or employers. And we are doing our best to be able to support as many of them as possible right now.
Is there a segment that's also, mistaking just general uncertainty to being mental, health issues? Or that's a very small subsegment? Because, I mean, that's all, I think the younger generation has a tendency of trying to find answers for everything. And, and they're self-diagnosing themselves being, okay, there's something wrong with me because of XYZ.
I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the empirical data to say yes or no to the answer. But what I would say is that I would rather that people sought support and were wrong and didn't need it, than didn't seek support and were wrong and needed it. Right. So in this case, I would rather that there were more false positives than false negatives, if that makes sense, right? So in this putting in the context of the current environment, I'd rather there were more false positives where people actually came forward and sought support, and then we figured out in a short conversation or that actually you're fine and just do these 2-3 things and you'll be okay, rather than somebody really struggling thinking no everything's fine with me and then it lead to a very bad outcome, right? So that's what I would say the starting point. Now there is a challenge, right? There's a population-line challenge where awareness exists at 2 levels, right? Awareness today in mental health exists at 2 levels. One thing is saying, okay, Amit knows what depression is. Conceptually, I know what depression is, but then B, Amit also understands that what he's experiencing right now might be depression. Or as clinically we call it depressive disorder or depressive episode. But so awareness exists at 2 levels, right? It's the conceptual awareness of mental health or mental illness, and then the self-awareness that you might be experiencing it right now. Right, and it's evolving, right? I think India is about 5x more aware today, and this is my extrapolated number from the data I'm seeing around awareness and all that. But India is my extrapolation is India is about 5x more aware today around mental health issues, at least in the urban population. And I'm not just saying urban wealthy, but urban generally population compared to where they were 5 years ago. And it's constantly rising. A lot of things have helped with it. the ubiquitous nature of information dissemination, or whether it's celebrities coming and really championing the cause of mental health illness and awareness, or general acceptance, right? The Prime Minister talked about mental health in one of those first. I remember the second or third speech he did during the lockdown. One thing he talked about was maintaining good mental health, right? The government has launched multiple helplines to support people's mental health this time, right? 10, 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, that would not have happened. Your focus would have been on the immediate crisis and nobody would have thought about mental health. But the real conversations are happening around mental health right now at every level, right? Every level of government, every level of private enterprise, every level of individuals and families, real conversations are happening. So definitely increased awareness at both the conceptual and self levels happening, but there is still a lot of headroom to grow, right? India has 197 million people with mental illness, right? So and the treatment gap in India is somewhere between 80 and 95%, depending on what study you look at. That means the number of people who actually need mental health support to the actual number of people who get it, 80 to 95% people don't get mental health support when they need it.
Oh, wow.
Right? So that's the treatment gap. So the headroom to grow the awareness levels in this population, both at a conceptual and self level, is huge. But is it heading in the right direction? Absolutely. All the work that's been done by the government, by not-for-profits, by for-profits, by private individuals, celebrities, has really helped that. And as an example, over 700,000 people have taken our sort of self-assessment quizzes, which really help them understand at a very broad level, in a non-diagnostic way, whether they might have a psychological difficulty.
Okay.
So over 7 lakh people have taken them in the last 2 years, 2-3 years.
So the app enables you to also self-diagnose. So it's
no, we don't self-diagnose. Just to be very clear, we do help people to actually get a better sense, right? The diagnosis is something that happens with clinicians, right?
Understood.
We just help people get a better sense of whether what their experience might be a psychological difficulty that they should seek help for. That's what we do today.
So it's like a screening tool. It's screening tool.
General screening tool, right? And people can people can actually better understand what their psychological condition, psychological health is like, and then take a call as to whether they should seek further support or not. So that's what so a lot of people are taking. People are more curious to understand what's going on. Absolutely. Right?
How do you see the gap being bridged, right? Because I've seen around the world a lot of these suicide helplines, support tools, etc., being supported by volunteers. There's a intense training for the volunteers who come on board, and then that's a great way to scale, right? Because a lot of people who want to do good and they're available and they have the right appropriate training to also support their audience. Is that the only way to go? Is that happening in India as well?
Very good suicide helplines. We are not one. A number of very good suicide helplines are out there that work as NGOs, that work as part of the government organizations. Absolutely, right? So that work's happening, and yes, a lot more can happen around that. There's a lot more scope to grow there as well. But that work's happening, right? That's one thing for sure. And there's a lot of scope there to grow that as well. But it's a partnership, right? There's a lot of things are partnerships. How to diagnose people? So how to get people to access support early in a frictionless manner, so that they're not left languishing with a mental illness for a very long time. So that's not, no service can solve that. It's about creating the awareness about access that has to be created on top of the service, right? Then channeling them to the right service for them, making sure that the entire journey is synced up. Right? They're not going to different places for different things, and you can sync up the entire journey for them. And then within that, there have to be multiple players that have a role, right? There is a role for digital platforms for self-care. There are roles for tele-health platforms. There is a role for people doing good outpatient and inpatient care in the offline space for more severe patients. There is a role for suicide helplines. All of that has a role. And there are multiple segments of people who play a part, right? Whether it's government, non-government, private, for-profit, not-profit. All those players, there is a role for everybody, right? And as I said, so Pratap Reddy, who is the founder of Apollo, said, I've heard him speak a few times now, and a few years ago he said something very, very interesting to me. He said, India is not a country where you worry about competition in healthcare. India is a country where you collaborate in healthcare, right? Because he said the unmet need is so huge that you have 3, 4, 5 decades before you start worrying about competition. you have to worry about providing very, very good quality healthcare to everybody who comes to your door, and that's what you have to solve for, right? And not worry about what the other guy is doing, and because there's enough room for everybody at different segments, different price points, different levels of offering. There's enough room for everybody because the need is so huge, right? Now, so there, and in mental health especially, the need is really for collaboration at this stage. We're not at a point where the large companies are competing for a market share of the same pie. We are at the stage where different types of organizations doing different offerings have to collaborate to actually get help to as many people as possible and then keep growing in that journey. Yeah, we might get there in 20, 30 years where it could start becoming competitive, but right now we're not there. This is still a journey where we're collaborating.
So you're saying basically more people the better, because ultimately it is resulting in probably better outcomes, more people getting support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always believe that that in this space, and I've always believed that, not just since I've come back to India, that in this space, I've actually talked to people from the competition. I've given advice. I've sought advice from people in competition, or I'm putting competition in quotes here, because we have to work together. There is so much to do. The issue is not that. I think that, and there's a role for everybody right now to do it right. What I worry about is people who don't do it right. Right, and then I get worried. But there's enough room for everybody doing it right, and there's lots of people doing really good work right now. Whether it's the government or private organizations, there are people doing some fantastic, phenomenal work at different levels right now, and different scale. And all we have to do is take that good practice from each of those levels and scale that up. So that more people can get access to good practice, which is often more localized.
So does that mean there are a lot of people who don't understand the space but have been trying to do things not in the right direction?
No. That doesn't mean that at all. What that means is that people are trying different things, right, in this space, because it's still a younger space. You have to solve for it, and not everything that gets tried out works well. Right, so being able to evaluate it all the time and make those decisions in real time is very, very important. Right, the intent is always good. The intent and knowledge based starting point is usually very good. Yeah, people. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, there's some excellent professionals in this country, right, who are all trying to do very, very good things. Right.
Right.
And there's a lot of scope for partnering and collaboration amongst each other to really make a real impact for the mental health need in this country. So, and that's where the majority of the conversation is. Sure.
So we have about 500,000 users on in an hour. Is that audience coming primarily from India? Is it open to across geographies? Does mental health remain the same across the world?
So we typically market only in India, right? But yeah, organically we are seeing traction from a large number of countries across the globe, right? Right. So whether the self-care app is used by a large number of users, almost in 70, 80 countries now across the globe, right? And we see and so we see that a lot across a user group, right? And the mental challenges are pretty much similar at different levels in different conditions, and people are more united and similar than different when it comes to mental health conditions, especially people at similar socioeconomic strata or similar profiles, right? They have similar challenges. Having said that, a lot of mental health delivery has to be context specific, right? So when I start doing sort of one-to-one treatments, for example, they need to be more localized to somebody who understands the context better, right? So, or who understands the context of the individual, the context of the ecosystem, the context of the family there, the context of the support networks there better. So that part is hard to globalize and export from here. And so that has to be more localized in different geographies. But the self-care platform, where people are working on themselves but are getting the strategies and tools and the programs to do that has got a more universal global appeal. Even that requires some localization in terms of languages. Sometimes the context has to be tweaked a bit. Right. So right now we're largely an English platform, but we are looking at other local languages as we sort of start growing, which will then give more localization and context to specific sort of geographies.
I saw that Inner Hour was part of the Facebook Accelerator. That it's a program that they run. What was the outcome, or rather the expectation from a program like that? And what are they given return?
First of all, was an excellent program. Let me tell you a bit about that. So it was a competitive process. I think we were in one of the 40 finalists that presented to them initially at the beginning of the program. So, and we were one of the 10 selected to join the program for that cohort of 2019. And then out of the 10 on demo day, we were the top 3 sort of companies that they picked for that year of the cohort, right? So we had a great experience with them, and their expectation really was to just for us to comply with and show up to the engagements we said we show up, right? So they didn't. It was not an equity based program. They really were trying to support us and help the ecosystem of tech based solutions in India grow. So our expectation was that we'd get some support around our product development, right? And a few areas around that. So one of the key things we were looking to solve for at that point was what does our AI ML framework start looking like, right? And how can we at least start preparing for that early on? And so they were very good. I mean, they flew down their team members from Menlo Park. We had at least 2 or 3 face-to-face meetings with them, and then they were available to us on calls every fortnight. So it was a very intensive program in which they gave us a lot of support to start thinking about our sort of AI ML backend and start preparing for that. And yeah, so we were eternally grateful to all the support we got from them on that. So and that's what we expected. I mean, when we joined, I mean, we didn't expect we'll get so much. But our expectation was some support around product, and it was basically the cohort was called AI for Social Good. So the expectation was that there'll be support on the AI side, and we got it. We got it in many different levels: practical levels of implementation, thinking about the infrastructure, thinking about the team that will deliver it, all those understandings, thinking about early experimentation equations, all those understandings we got from or support we got from the team at Facebook, both in India and in the US.
That's fantastic. You're a non-technical founder of a company. Has that been a challenge building a tool in the tech space?
It would have been if I had built it myself. I think all in my view and all my experience over the years, all successes are team efforts, right? So even here, it's not just me building a product myself. There is a team, right? I have a co-founder who has a significant PR, marketing, and entrepreneurship experience. I have a CTO who this is his 3rd startup, so he's helped and build to scale. He helped build 2 startups before, scaled the last one significantly before he moved to us. I've had product managers from IIT Bombay who've been really instrumental in driving the product journey. So and there's a very good content team. There's a very good therapist team. There's a design team with very, very good designers, both from IIT and from other premier design institutes in the country. So yeah, we have a very good high quality team. So yeah, it would have been absolute. I mean, I wouldn't even say challenge. I would say nightmare if I was going to go and build this myself. But I've been lucky to have a very, very good team around me that have helped us get to this stage.
Amit, you mentioned a little bit about the pro bono work that InnerHour is offering to corporates. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so on the app for individual users, we have basically we charge for 3 things right now. In the regular times, we charge for we give you a free plan for 7 days anyways for everybody. We don't charge for that, but for people who want a full personalized 28-day plan, we charge them a nominal amount. Right? In India, it's 99 right now, but it's 199 normally, right? So per month. So it's and then we charge you the therapist support part is paid for because that costs us money, and then we can't always afford to pay that. We give that for free. What we've done right now, though, for a lot of partner organizations, which includes healthcare frontline healthcare workers, we've onboarded a couple of large hospitals. We've onboarded employer organizations, frontline NGO organizations. We've onboarded all of these organizations. What we've done is we made the app entirely free for them, right? We've also built a program of workshops, webinars typically around them, and a lot of regular content emails that are going in. So it's almost a program of regular content being fed to them, the app being made totally free, and regular weekly webinars to the members of that organization, whether it's healthcare workers or it's employees, but the members of the organization. And this we made free for the period of lockdown. So and people are really using it. Even our webinar engagement, for example, is up by about 130-140%. Right, so people are really using these solutions to support themselves in these times, essentially. So yeah, so that's the InnerHour Pro Bono program right now, which really is supporting these organizations. They can get in touch with us. We sort of are able to onboard them pretty quickly in a few hours, and then we give them the communication to send out their employees or their frontline workers, and then we are good to go. So we've streamlined the onboarding process as well as making sure that they get access to the right content, right programs. We've launched a bunch of self-care programs, particularly for the pandemic, right? So managing your your health self-care in this pandemic time, build a specific program for healthcare workers specifically, right? We've launched all these new programs on the platform that are now available for free to everybody anyway. So that is part of our free offering to all users right now, is the content that's specific to the pandemic right now.
How do companies get in touch with you if they want to offer this to their employees during the lockdown and others? What would be the best way to sign up?
I mean, the easiest way is to just give us a call. The number's on the website. It's www.innerhour.com, or they could just come to the website, and there's a 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. We have somebody manning the chat channel, and they could just leave the details there, and we get back in touch with them, or they could just drop us an email at support@theinnerhour.com. support@theinnerhour.com.
I will leave the email and contact information wherever I post the podcast.
Great, thanks a lot.
Are you hiring at this moment? Seems like you guys have a lot of work.
Yes, no, we are hiring. We've just actually closed the key hire this morning. We are actually looking at hiring people in all parts of our business, whether it's on the commercial side, whether it's on the therapy side. We've been increasing our therapist network as well, and absolutely. So right now, we want to make sure that team is always equipped to handle the support that needs to go out to people. So yeah, absolutely, we're expanding the team right now.
So they can again reach out on careers@theinnerhour.com.
So I mean, they could reach out at on the website. There's an option to apply, right? If you're looking to apply to Inner Hour, there's on the website there's a careers option. You just have to leave your details and upload your resume there, and then we get back in touch with you. Or again, they can drop an email to support@theinnerhour.com again.
Awesome. Amit, where does Inner Hour go from here? Is it continuing to build for the Bharat, the non-English speaking audience? Is it global? What's the direction that you want to take?
So there's definitely an international sort of traction that's growing, and that will continue to grow. But we are really focused in the India piece right now. Right? We think the need here is acute. We think that the provision here is still at a stage where there's a lot of gap, right? So we are really focusing on building for India right now, and given the product's validity, how people are seeing symptom improvements, we expect that there'll be people outside India who will use it as well, right? But we are focusing to look at in India right now, and building a product strategy around that and implementing this.
You mentioned that you have a $199 per month subscription. A lot of subscription businesses are built strongly outside of India, and that also means that they put their credit card information for that monthly deduction, right? That's how a SaaS business works, where there's need.
Yeah.
So I would imagine when they come to an Inner Hour, they want to spend. They want to get cured or want to get support. Do you see there being a large lifetime value? Because otherwise I would think there would be a 2-month, 3-month, 5-month program that helps you. And then if you want more support, you come back. Because unlike a calm.com or anything else where you want music and stories and other things, how do you think about that? How do you look at that?
So our programs are ongoing, right? So even once you're better, there's a lot of ongoing stuff to keep you better, right? So a lot of strategies, a lot of activities, a lot of content is really there so it's an ongoing journey, right? So the first step is to get you from feeling mentally unwell to feeling mentally well, and the second step is keeping you mentally well. So that's when the health part kicks in, right? So again, the journey is really around. It's an ongoing journey. So yeah, so we see a long-term association with users and supporting them in their mental health journey for long periods of time, right? and making sure that we integrate whatever the care they require on our platform, right? So that's where we, whether it's from a therapist, whether it's from self-care, whether it's more than that, we try to integrate everything in one platform. That for the user, this becomes the one-stop shop for their mental health needs, basically.
Amit, this has been great. This is so whoever's listening to this program should either download the app if they feel like they want to do the self-assessment, or share it with folks and talk about it more, because I think it's important to also reduce the stigma of wanting to use these. I think that's very close to your heart as well, in terms of making it easier for others to want to do this, to take it up, and not feel like there's something wrong with them. So I would encourage whoever is listening to the show to do it, to share the story of Inner Hour. But thanks so much for your time. This is awesome. Keep doing the amazing work.
And that's the end of episode 7 of Stars and Startups with me, Varun Vumidi. Don't forget to log on to Inner Hour's website or app to sign up for the opportunity to offer Inner Hour services to your team. Don't forget, this is available only until the end of lockdown. In any case, do give them a look. I'm leaving the link in show notes. Hey guys, you gotta do me a favor. Share the episode with friends and family who could benefit from hearing from Indian startup founders, operators, and their journey. Are there any founders doing amazing things? Do send me a message. Would love to have them on the show. You can send me a tweet at Varun Vumidi on Twitter. Don't forget to leave me a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. And do subscribe if you haven't already done so. We're now available on iTunes, Google Podcast, and all the popular podcasting apps out there. This is me, Varun Vumidi, signing off. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode coming your way.